Greetings, heathens and heretics, and welcome to another episode of In the Abyss with me, obviously, because I'm never anywhere else. Voice of reason, no Saudi Queen this week. Time doesn't allow, but instead, because you can't keep away, come back for more. Nige from Chupacabra is with us once more for a specific reason, but we'll get to that in a minute. Nige, how are we doing? How's sunny Bristol?
Sunny Bristol is fucking freezing, but otherwise I'm doing, which is why I'm wearing a hat indoors. But I'm doing well, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, well, see about that. But it's fucking freezing here as well. It's I just I'm sitting in a hotel room, for those who really want to know, that are these weird heating things that are up, like all the way up there, pretty much on the ceiling. So if I was to stand on the bed, my head's nice and warm, but everything kind of about 3 foot and below that is freezing fucking cold. So yeah, it's but anyway, no one gives a shit about that. So this week we've a few weeks back, or a few months back as it was, we did an episode called Metal Island Discs with a couple of guests, and it was a little bit of a drunken mess, if I'm completely honest. So we thought we'd well, yeah. I can't even remember whether we actually got through everyone's selections or what. I really don't know. It was chaos, but we kind of like the format, so we thought we'd drag Nige back on so we can have his selection of 8 essential albums on a desert island, plus favorite metal shirt and a luxury item. We will get to that in a minute, because before we do, we want to talk about a couple of gigs from the last couple of weeks, or the last week or so. First up, last week was the Almighty's Build As final ever shows. Glasgow, Manchester, London, wasn't it, with the 3 dates?
Yep. Yeah.
And we caught the London show on Saturday night. You know, we're of that age where, you know, that 90s hard rock stuff was really important to us, and none of us had seen the Almighty, so it was, you know, 100% straight on that. We haven't really talked about it much between us all, about the gig. Well, we kind of raved about it a little bit, but we haven't really discussed it in much detail. So, you know, do you enjoy it?
Yeah,
it was all right.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, let's be honest. It's been too cold to fucking talk, and you've been busy doing your work shit. So,
well, yeah,
that's it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it was something special. I think we were hoping it would be. I mean, the reasons they sort of said they get together was because, essentially, because of COVID. I think it makes you reconsider things in life, and they thought, you know what, let's do this. We haven't done it for a while. It's the original lineup. We got Tantrum back, which surprised me, but that's what they did. And it was just a couple of free gigs. Nothing major. I mean, they did their rehearsals a week ago,
about a week before. Yeah, that's all it was. Yeah, They've
been obviously working at their own stuff, preparing in advance. Of course, I have. And Ricky Warwick never stops bloody songwriting or playing guitar.
No.
But you know, considering they hadn't played together for, I think, 10, 12 years when they last.
Yeah, no, longer than that. I think 2008, 2009 were the last shows, I think.
Okay.
I'd have to double check that, but yeah, at least a decade. Yeah.
I mean, tight as.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have known they hadn't played for years together. They gelled just like that. Sound wise, really pleased with the sound. Earplugs, no objections. Just what you needed. And it was just, you know, it was straightforward hard rock. No nonsense, no bullshit, no fancy stuff. Just great songs, because that's what set them apart from a lot of the stuff at that time. They had the songs, as you said the other night.
Yeah, completely, and that is the difference with bands like the Almighty. They fundamentally are a very simple, straightforward hard rock band, but when you've got songs that strong, you're always going to have something to offer, and that came through. I mean, you take, for instance, the support acts were Balaam and the Angel, and I'm not overly familiar with, but fuck me, did they phone that in? It was just flat as a fart. And, you know, bands of a similar era, but you compare the two, Almighty come on, and obviously everyone's there to see the Almighty, but straight away the level is 100 times higher.
Yeah.
You know, and that instant chemistry, like you said, that the four of them have got, Oh, mate, it was fucking great fun. Great fun.
No,
You know,
absolutely.
best part of 2 hour long set list, only about an hour and 50
Pretty
minutes.
much, yeah.
Yeah. And everything we wanted to hear.
Yeah, I mean, the set list was. I mean, yeah, I was pleased with the set list. Can't argue with it. And I still came out thinking, oh God, they didn't play. You know, no gift horse,
Yeah.
no sick and wired, no
power tripping, no broken machine.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, it was. They played 6 songs off the first album, Blood, Fire, and Love.
Yeah.
You know,
6 off of Soul Destruction one as well, I think, wasn't there?
Something like that.
About 5 off of Crank and
4 or 5 off the others. Yeah, I mean, they did play from Just Add Life onwards, which I would have liked to have heard a couple of the later ones, but I realise why they've stuck to those old albums.
Yeah, completely. And I get the impression that, you know, while it was billed as like final ever shows, it felt like they were treading water a little bit, weren't they? See how this goes. If it goes well, will we do more? You know, it's once the dust settles. I don't know. Do you think they'll carry on?
I mean, you don't know, but the thing is, with someone like Ricky, he's always working. He's always doing stuff. He's always playing music.
Yeah.
If there's downtime with Black Star Riders or his, you know, or solo stuff, or, you know, Thin Lizzy or whatever, what's he going to do? I mean, start another band? But if there's a demand for him, there clearly was last night. Would they be able to do a small UK tour? I don't know. Maybe not, but there's no reason why they can't at least do a festival slot here.
Festivals. Yeah,
you know,
completely. You think about all the hard rock kind of festivals that there are now, Made of Stone and Stone Dead, and there are others as well. But even Bloodstock to an extent.
Yeah.
Why not? As a, you know, that kind of nostalgia act sort of thing. But
what they did well for a bit is they managed to move with the times. So, you know, 93 was Power Trip in that third album.
Yeah.
Changed guitarists. So you're a couple of years into grunge by then, but they didn't go grunge by any means, but they brought in that sort of Alice in Chains heaviness, didn't they?
A bit of an alternative.
Yeah, they brought into it, but they still had that hard rock fundamental sensibility there. That was the foundation of it. They just shifted enough. And that's arguably their best album. It's heavy as fuck.
Yeah.
Really good songs. There's a real insidiousness to it as well. And then with Crank, 94 came out the same year as Therapy's Trouble Gum, Television, How to Make Friends. You know, there's all sorts of Britpop stuff and the Britbox going on. US punk has kicked off, and that album, it's not so much grunge. It is more of a classic punk meets sort of metal album. It's angry. It's angry and heavy. Ricky's cut all his hair off, and Saturday night it kicked off with that stuff. I mean, I like the Crank stuff, and it's one of those. It's almost a bit underrated because everyone thinks of the earlier stuff. It kicked off. I mean, I've never seen that many 50-something men go nuts at one point for a long time.
That was a lot of people coming out of mosh pit retirement. That was. Nigel smirking as well. I can see you down there.
Yeah. No, there was a lot of that, and I think the thing is they never built up their profile any more than that. They never gained new followers. They kept that cult fan base, I expect. But with so much going on in the music scene, in the British music scene at that point, all these new bands, indie rock, whatever, pretty much leapfrogging them in sales. And I can see why by the next album in 96, which was a good album, Just Have Life, it was. They probably thought, you know what, we're not getting anywhere. And it's a shame they split up because they were much better than that. But I can understand why they did, because it's like the public just didn't want to know.
Probably sort of from a trend point of view, if you want, they'd probably kind of run their course a little bit. And like I say, your grunge, and then new metal kicked in after that. So, you know, everything kind of shifted. But Nige, you're not a massive Almighty fan, are you? Which surprised me.
Well, not really. It's kind of weird, but I mean, we might touch on this a little bit when we're talking about the albums in a bit. But for me, in the 90s, I kind of didn't really listen to much stuff that was going on in the 90s. Like the 90s was when I went backwards.
Yeah.
And started, because obviously in the 80s, when I was a teenager, and it was 100% metal for me. And then in the 90s, my taste broadened, but I went backwards. And that's when I discovered what had happened before the 80s. So in the 90s, I was listening to Sabbath, Zeppelin, Beatles, Hendrix, The Doors. You know, it was more like, I don't want to say too much more, but yeah, the 90s, I didn't get into grunge. I didn't get into Britpop. I wasn't listening to most of the stuff that was kind of popular then. So I just didn't really, the Almighty, when I've heard of them, but I honestly couldn't name you a single song, which is weird or terrible, I know. And I should probably investigate them because, you know, you guys have good taste and, you know, our tastes pretty much overlap on a lot of areas. And so, but yeah, it was a band that I certainly back at the time, they just didn't come across my radar at all.
Yeah, that it makes sense. Like I said earlier, they are a hard rock band. There's no frills going on. It is simple, 2 guitar, bass, drums, vocals, hard rock band, but they always had the songs. And that's why seeing them, you know, last week after all these years, neither of us had seen them before. It was, you know, those anthems come out and you're singing along and your throat's croaky, your neck aches, and it's just fucking great fun.
So that's interesting though that you said that, and like you said that they never really kind of built momentum, right? They started with a fan base but never really kind of grew. And maybe that's because it's interesting that neither of you had ever seen them before. But I wonder if that's why. Like maybe that's why it didn't come across my radar.
Yeah, that's quite possible. Yeah,
it's time with us. I mean, I was 16 when I properly got into metal after sort of dallying with indie and sort of rock stuff, and that was 96, and that's when they split up. So right. I was just a bit too late. And yeah, we were too young to go to. We didn't go to grunge gigs at the time. We, you know, whatever we listened to,
Yeah, my brother, before he passed, you know, he's sort of 10, 12 years older than me, and he was a big 80s and early 90s heavy metal fan anyway. He was of that age, but you know, the Almighty were one of his favorite acts because he was just at that right sort of age. So, you know, when you're in your sort of late teens, early 20s, around sort of Donington 94, 95, that was kind of the end of it. That was the end of the leather jacket, long hair, denim. You know, it was all starting to die out by then, wasn't it? Maiden was sort of passing on as they were. It was, I think Almighty they were in that market, and that's where it ended. So, you know, but there's always space for bands like that to come back and do their thing, as they proved last week.
Well, I'm going to investigate them because I need to. Yeah, I'll check them out. I always put them in my mind. I always think of them in the same bracket as Therapy. Is that fair, or are they different?
A bit more old school, a bit more Motorhead. I think than Therapy would be. You know, there's a fair chunk of Motorhead in the Almighty sound, definitely. So
it's interesting because I mean, Therapy for me, they're more of a punk band who could be. That's, you know, their influence was hardcore stuff like Husker Du and whatnot, but they had a metal background. You know, the Almighty, they come from that sort of late 80s British hard rock stuff. So their peers were bands like Gun, Thunder, Little Angels, The Choir Boys, Wolfsbane, and later on the Wild Hearts. In fact, you know, I mean, in '93 they toured with the Wild Hearts and Curb Dog. I mean, Christ Almighty! I mean, that's the tour I would just love to have gone to. But
Brit Rock heaven.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Therapy. Yeah, they were a bit more alternative, and I think Therapy wouldn't have got anywhere if it wasn't for grunge. I don't think they were, you know, very indebted to that. I think that alternative stuff. Whereas
it was the whole alternative rock thing, wasn't it? Well, yeah.
But I think by sort of '94, I mean, you know, '94, like I say, Mighty released Crank, Therapy released Trouble Gum. Both albums were produced by Chris Sheldon, heavy as fuck, really good sort of, you know, they complemented each other quite well. But there's a bit of a different, you know, difference there in terms of their heritage, I think.
Yeah. Well worth checking out. I think I'd be surprised if you didn't like them.
I'll check them out. Where should I start? With their first album?
Yeah, start with Blood, Fire and Love, because his debut album, 1989. You just think if Motorhead were from LA, it probably would have sounded like that.
Okay, that sounds good.
So, and that's a compliment. That's, you know, by no means anything else. So yeah, look, you know, overall, it was one of my favorite gigs of the year, I think, just because it's just, you know, it's always nice to see a band that never seen before, never thought you were going to see. So yeah, fucking happy days. On a slightly different note, last Tuesday, while I was up here in Birmingham, I went to see Skynd. Now, not normally my type of thing. So if anybody doesn't know who they are, they also headlined the Sophie stage one of the nights of Bloodstock in the summer. And I think Bean and a couple of other people that were with us went to check them out and said they're really good. It's kind of industrial pop, I suppose, with there's a bit of a goth tinge. It's quite current, I would say. It's quite now, but look, went with a total open mind, and I actually really enjoyed it. It's not the kind of thing that the bits I've listened to recorded haven't really filled me with much at all, but live it all starts to come to life. The vocalist, I did look up her name, but I can't remember what it is, but unbelievable voice, incredible, just range from all the way down here to all the way up there and everything in between. Thought she was incredible. And then it was drums, it was a bass player, and then sort of samples and keys and stuff like that. So you've got a little bit of Nine Inch Nailsy stuff going in there, and then just some alternative pop. But I found myself thinking they could translate this to a recorded format. So I think they'd be really good, and I would be quite into it. But it just seems to fall a little bit flat recorded. But live, I would urge anybody to check them out. And it was a very metal crowd, which I was quite surprised at. There's a lot of patch jackets, your usual metal cliches. I was expecting it to just be full of teenage goths, to be fair, but it really wasn't. So I don't suppose either of you have listened to them at all, have you?
I haven't. I'll be honest. I haven't given enough of a go yet. I mean, I think I did try to check them out in advance of Bloodstock, and I think they didn't grab me at the time compared to others.
Same thing.
Time and all that. I think what they did, they struck me as they reminded me of a kind of sort of gothy nu metal bands that were often played at the end of horror movies in the early noughties.
Right. Okay. I get you.
They got that sort of vibe. That's not a criticism or an attack. They've got that kind of vibe.
It's an observation.
That sort of, like you say, popular gothic industrial. And there was a lot of that in the early noughties. I think if Evanescence sort of did more Nine Inch Nails stuff, maybe that's kind of where they're coming from.
Yeah, I can see that.
So but I didn't dislike it. It was more a case of I've only got so much time to check things out, and that didn't quite make the pile, as it were, at the time.
They may be up your street, to be fair.
It could well be, yeah.
So do check them out. But the kind of band that if they're at a festival again, and I will definitely go and check them out, because it's nice to be entertained. It's nice to be surprised when you're just thinking, I'm not sure what to expect for this, and you come away having enjoyed it. So yeah, well worth checking out.
Yeah, that's always the case with a lot of bands out there. Is they build up a really good live set.
Yeah,
and they nail that, even if the songs aren't great at the point. They focus on the live set, and that's kind of what you need to be doing, because that's where the word of mouth comes,
and that's where you make a living as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Recording stuff. Okay, you make a first album, it's all right. You haven't got a great producer, for example. That comes next.
Yeah,
that's normal and all that. And then people reassess the first album, and you build up a fan base, and they can enjoy it. So yeah, it's. I think give them a choice between a great first album and a crap live show, or a great live show and a so-so first album. It's always a second choice, because that's what you do. You're a band. The point of a band is to play live and entertain, and something. The rest comes. So, yeah,
completely. Well, it was quite a big UK tour. I think there was a fair few dates. So, I would imagine that the venue was sold out, or certainly near as damn it. Probably held around about 1,200 people. So, outside of London, that's always a decent following. So, yeah, watch this space. We'll see what happens from here. But anyway, enough waffle. Before Nige falls asleep, it's weeknights, and it's getting late.
Yeah, it's almost 8 o'clock.
Yeah, it's time to be tucked in. The nurse is coming around soon. So we dragged you on here we've been talking about it for a while. We thought you were the perfect person to come on here, do this for the first time, so we can try and do it properly. Now, we didn't really stipulate anything in terms of genre or anything like that. So, it was a completely open forum. Just recapping, 8 records, you're on a desert island, 8 records, a luxury item, and an essential metal shirt. So what's your first record?
When we say luxury item, I think we should sort of stipulate from now on, nothing ridiculous, because it got out of. We were talking about building the London Astoria on the bloody on the island, or having a massive bazooka or something,
a construction team and all that. Yeah,
I think
you're right with that. Yeah, that's fair.
Or something to the gods of the flies or whatever. So I think we need to say from now on to our guests.
a realistic luxury item, maybe. But yeah. So go on then. What's no particular order? What's the first record on the list? And we'll sit and wait and either praise you or slag you off till the cows come home.
Well, I can tell you, there's no Beatles on the list, so I've saved you from that. So yeah, I tried to sort of, maybe I took this too seriously because, as you know, I come from a thrash background, so I could easily have just picked 8 thrash albums. But then I was thought, well, if these are supposed to be the only 8 albums that you're allowed to listen to, then I kind of wanted to bring a bit of breadth as well.
Exactly. You got to have a bit of variety, haven't you?
So anyway, well, as that said, obviously there's some thrash on here, and number one, this isn't in any particular order, but this one probably is the number one because it was the first one I wrote down. Metallica and Justice for All. Metallica were one of my 2 gateway bands into metal, specifically Ride the Lightning. To be honest, I could have picked any of the first 4 albums. Metallica were the first concert I ever went to. But Justice for All is the one over the years that I've gone back to, that I find myself going back to the most. So I think, and that's obviously not to say that the first 3 I don't go back to, because obviously I do. They're all fucking masterpieces in their own way for me, right? And they mean a lot to me. But Justice is the one that I listen to still to this day the most often. For me, it's got, they were at their most technical. I think Hetfield's riffs were never better than on that record. I think for me, it's got my favorite fast Metallica song, Blackened, which I think is just absolutely fucking phenomenal. What a way.
Masterpiece. In terms of album openers as well, it doesn't get much better than Blackened.
Exactly. It's my favorite. I was going to say, it's my favorite fast Metallica song, and it's my favorite opening song, possibly on any album. Certainly my favorite Metallica opener. It's got my favorite, this is tough, but it's got my favorite sort of slower ballad, right? I mean, obviously Fade to Black's amazing, Sanitarium's amazing, but I think for me, one is just a phenomenal song. And for me, it's one of those songs that last, I don't know how long it is, but it's like 7 minutes, but it feels like it lasts 2 minutes. It's just got so much great stuff in there. I think the deep cuts on Justice are brilliant. Frayed Ends of Sanity is just so good. Eye of the Beholder, Harvester of Sorrow, which I know is a single. But for me, it's just got everything. And people bitch about the production, but I think it fits perfectly because it's got this kind of cold, like sort of almost like impersonal kind of feeling to it, which sort of matches the lyrical content a little bit because it's all to do with, for me, it's got a fantastic instrumental. It's not my favorite Metallica instrumental because that's Orion, but it's got an amazing instrumental. The last track is amazing as well. Incredible lyrics, another amazing fast song. For me, it's just fucking perfection. And I think that as an album, I don't think they ever did better.
It's also really fucking long. So if you're on a desert island, you've got a bit of haven't you?
It's. I think when I sort of listened to it, first time in a while, actually, a few months back, last year, whenever it was, it just how much there is going on, because I think I didn't listen to it as much compared to the other classics, because I think the production just put me off. It had that, it put me off simply, and I love production on the earlier albums. But it's at that point where you're sort of used to it, but it always gives its own personality, doesn't it? Those riffs and those, the breadth of it, it's almost got a sort of different dimension, and I know it's a word that's probably not appropriate, but it feels very cyber in a way, very futuristic.
Totally. Like machine-like, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Mechanical.
Clinical, almost. It's,
Mechanical.
Yeah, what more superlatives can you give it? Look, it is a funny one, Justice, because you're right. It's like song-wise, it is just fucking incredible. When you watch back now, when Metallica your first show, what tour was that?
Master of Puppets.
Fuck me. Right, okay. You go back to things like that, that ridiculous show in Moscow and stuff like that, and how particularly Harvester of Sorrow sounded then when it came to life in a live stage. That's what makes you realize what great fucking songs they are, because just sound huge.
Yeah,
totally.
I saw, as I think I've mentioned when we've had beers and stuff, I saw Metallica on this most recent tour. I went to one of the nights in Paris back in May this year, and they played Harvester as I think it was the second song, and it was just like, fucking hell, this song's amazing, And I'd seen them play One tons of times. I'd seen them play Creeping Death tons of times. Obviously, they're amazing songs, right? But Harvester, I think I'd seen them play once a long time ago, but not since then. But listening to it then was just like, fuck, man, this is so good. And it's like, and then when you think they were 27 when they wrote it or something, it's just like, you fuckers.
It's also like possibly the most Hetfield Metallica song, if that makes sense. Like all Hetfield's like vocal strength and lyrical strength, it comes out in every possible way on that song. Yeah, I agree. It's just, I just think the whole album is just, and I think, the production point is a really interesting one, because I agree with you that the production is definitely can be an acquired taste. Back in the 80s, I was listening to a bunch of really fucking ropey early, German thrash, which sounded terrible. So actually back in the day, I didn't listen to Justice and go, God, this production's terrible, because I had loads of albums that sounded way worse than that, And I think what's interesting is, if you listen or if you watch on YouTube now, they've done that Justice for Jason thing where they've kind of worked out a way of, I don't know if they've boosted the bass or whether somebody's re-recorded the bass over the top. So you can, and it might sonically, it might be better, but I think it loses something as well, which is really interesting, right? It's like, Jason was a great bass player, right? But without the bass on that album, gave it a charm all of its own, which is kind of weird saying that, but yeah. Well, we've also lived with it for more than 3 decades, so it's to change it now just seems fucking stupid. What's the point? What, you know what I mean? It's you could say that about, like you said, so many metal albums the production's not great, let's redo it. There's no point. It is what it is, and it stood the test of time. So, great first choice. What's number 2 then? Let's go straight in. Next one.
But number 2, kind of cheating a bit. I wasn't sure what your stance was on, not compilations exactly, but anyway. So my second choice is Iron Maiden Live After Death.
Yeah, I had that.
Fair enough.
Held on.
Yeah. So that means it's okay to include. So first of all, Iron Maiden was the other of my gateway albums into metal. Power Slave specifically. To give you the brief story, a mate of mine basically gave me this was when it was probably been like late 85, so I was like 13 and a half roughly, and a mate of mine gave me a C90, and on side A was Power Slave and side B was Ride the Lightning. Which is pretty, and I'd never heard metal before, right? And I was 13, I was young, right? And I listened to side A, Power Slave, mind blown. Listen to side B, Ride the Lightning, mind blown again. And then my third pick coming up, mind blown again. But anyway, so Live After Death, it was a tricky one, because I had to have Iron Maiden in there somewhere because they're such an important band to me. The problem is that for me, I think my favorite Maiden album flip-flops between Power Slave and Seventh Son. But the problem is if you pick Seventh Son, then there's so many songs that I just love and were so formative to me when I was a teenager that obviously wouldn't be on there. So eventually I went with Live After Death just because I think it's got, okay, I don't get the Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son classic songs, which I love. But I think for me, first of all, I think it's the best live album ever released, first of all. Second of all, I think it's got really great, almost definitive versions of some of their classic songs. Like I think the version of Hallowed Be Thy Name is better than it is on Number of the Beast. You know,
absolutely unreal version of that song.
Incredible. I think Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I prefer the live version to the Power Slave version. I think 2 Minutes to Midnight, I prefer on Live After Death compared to Power Slave. So for me, it's just, and it's essentially a greatest hits. I know it's live, but it's essentially a greatest hits. You look at the fucking track listing, it's just, you can't argue with it. It's just every song is an absolute fucking classic, and it's performed brilliantly well.
It's Maiden on fire at that point, isn't it? They've hit an absolute peak in terms of like live, because that's when they obviously broke the States, and the stage show just went silly, to be quite honest with you, for 1984, 1985. And yeah, they are just on an absolute high at that point. So it makes total sense.
Yeah, and I didn't see, you know, I didn't see them on that tour, but I guess Maiden, I guess Live After Death was the first Maiden album that was released after I became a fan. So I guess it was because obviously, so Power Slave was the first one I heard, and then Live After Death, by the time that came out, I was a fan. So yeah, I mean, it's just for me, it's just got everything. And it's, you know, with live albums, I think sometimes either the sound isn't as good, or obviously the sound isn't as good as it is in the studio. But I think in lots of live albums, I think end up sounding weaker for whatever reason.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not a massive fan of live albums generally, but I think in that instance, I think they just absolutely nail it, and most of it, I think, sounds better than the studio records, I think.
Yeah, I think that album it captures something. It's not just a live recording. It captures a bit of a moment in time. That might be a bit cliched, but it does, because after that, while Maiden still, you know, had Summer in Time and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, there was, you know, I think their personal relationships and things were starting to decline by that point. And, you know, it was kind of like, that's what I mean by they hit a peak around about then. Yeah. And then obviously after Seventh Son, it kind of went a little bit wrong. You lose a songwriter like Adrian Smith, you know, it's going to change. But yeah, Live After Death. I think actually I chose Best of the Beast rather than Live After Death, but it was always going to be a toss up between the two.
Yeah, I think you've got to recall that point in time, and we know about 1986 Crash, so we can talk about that for days. But the year before, 85, you know, was a point of heavy metal purely because of that tour. You know, on the other side of America, the glam stuff, which was as heavy metal. Yeah, 85 to 86 was just a glorious time to be into metal.
Yeah,
simple as that.
Yeah. Which obviously I did think at 4 or 5 years old.
Well, you know, I was kind of, you know, obviously I didn't realize it at the time, but with the benefit of hindsight, you know, I was kind of lucky to have been. So I was born in 72, right? So I turned 14 in March of 86.
Right, absolute prime.
So arguably I was a little bit, okay, I would love to have been 5 years older, because I would love to have seen, you know, I would love to have been 5 years older and been born in San Francisco, right? Because then you could have seen, you know, I could have seen Metallica when they were small and seen Slayer when they were small and Exodus. Yeah. But obviously that aside, you know, I was born at a pretty great time, because it was a formative, you know, it's most people's, I don't know when it was that you first got into music, but most people, I guess, get into music between, say, 13 and 15.
Yeah.
That was for me, was 85 to 87, right? So
yeah, a little bit younger for me, but again, I had the whole older brother thing, so
yeah, because I didn't.
It was an easy thing. It started about 10 roughly for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, same kind of principle. So yeah.
It's bizarre, everything you said sort of strikes a chord because we myself and Tregenza, we were born in 1980, so we were 80s kids. I had I've got an older sister, and she was born in 71.
Okay.
And so she turned 13 in 84.
Yeah, she's a year older than me.
Yeah. And I was 4 years old, but she was bang on the right age to get into Madonna.
Right.
Absolutely. In fact, that was her style for 2-3 years, basically, Madonna. But by that point, she was already into Duran Duran and Culture Club and Wham. And those were the first artists I listened to regularly as a very little boy. But I listened to the charts with her every Sunday. I played board games with her. I watched Top of the Pops with her. My sister, I owe a lot to my sister for getting me into good contemporary music, because my parents, they met through country music. So I'm so glad I owe a lot to my sister. I really do. The chart stuff, I kept listening to the chart stuff into the 90s, liking the odd rock track here and there, and of course by 94, Britpop, indie, Brit rock, pop punk, that's when it all happened for me. But what was interesting about my sister is she was so because of her age, she there was a couple of lads in her class at school. One of them was the older brother of my mate at school, and the other was actually the teenage son of our vicar.
Okay.
And I can remember both of them massive Iron Maiden fans, and I had because of my social life as a kid, I had access to both of their bedrooms. And I say my first memory of Iron Maiden is going into one of those bedrooms and seeing the massive Somewhere in Time poster and Cyborg Eddie, and that's kind of why I've got the back patch, because as much as Seventh Son is my favourite album, that was it. That was what imprinted on my mind as my first Eddie. And also, my sister was never into Iron Maiden, but it just shows exactly that was it. And mid 80s, you're a teenage boy, you were probably into Iron Maiden if you didn't like pop.
Yeah, I mean, I think from memory at school, there were kids who were into chart stuff, right? Then there was the metal kids, and there weren't that many of us. And then there were kids that were into like the Smiths and the Cure,
Fuck the Smiths.
Oh God, he's so fucking annoying.
Fuck Morrissey.
Fuck Morrissey. We like Marr.
Yeah, Johnny Marr I got no issue with, but fuck Morrissey. One of the biggest cunts on the planet. Anyway, carry on.
No, that's it. Yeah, there were kind of, as I remember, there were three kind of groups musically, anyway.
Yeah, fair.
So anyway, Live After Death, just fucking unbelievable. I
think if you're going to throw, I mean, we could have stipulated things like you must have a live album, you must have a best of or whatever, but you're right. You've got to think, of a particular band, how can I cover as much of the bases as possible, sort of thing. And Live After Death kind of nails it. But right, let's go straight in then. Number 3, what's next?
Right, so number 3 was the third. As I said, Mind Blown number 1 was hearing Power Slave. Mind Blown number 2 was hearing Ride the Lightning. Mind Blown number 3 was hearing Slayer, and specifically, I could have picked Rain in Blood, and I'm not being a contrarian for the sake of it, but I've gone with Hell Awaits because I absolutely love Rain in Blood. It is a fucking masterpiece for a reason. But personally, for me, Hell Awaits means more to me because it was the first. Okay, Ride the Lightning was kind of semi-thrash, I guess, but Hell Awaits was the first pure thrash album that I ever heard, and I have a distinct memory of. So this mate of mine that gave me this C90 cassette, I have this distinct memory of we used to hang out together in his room a lot, and I have the distinct memory of listening to Morbid Tales by Celtic Frost in there, and the first time I heard Hell Awaits was in his little. He had his tiny little bedroom, these massive fucking speakers. He had very long-suffering parents, and again, my mind was absolutely blown. I was like, "What the fuck?" Having thought nothing can be heavier than Iron Maiden, then thinking nothing can be heavier than Ride the Lightning, then thinking, what the fuck is this? This makes Ride the Lightning sound like fucking the Carpenters. and So for me, Halloween means more to me than Rain in Blood. I think as well, I think it's still got all of the brutality. I think Hell Awaits, the title track, is just a fucking absolutely crushingly fast song. Necrophiliac's got, I think, his most sick lyrics, which is always good, really. But I also think it's got a lot more light and shade. Like Rain in Blood, and I'm going to get fucking crucified for this. But for me, like Rain in Blood is like one note, right? It starts and then it just fucking beats you to death with a hammer and then stops. Yeah. Whereas Hell Awaits has got light and shade and slow bits and fast bits. And I think a song like
the intro to the title track is the perfect example of that slow building, brooding,
Right. And then like At Dawn They Sleep, which is a top 5 Slayer song for me, but it's not that fast, it's pretty slow, particularly the first half of it. It's got a groove, and a stomp. It's not just like brutally fast all the time. So I love the fact, again, the production's a little basic, obviously, but I think it really works with the album because it's got like it makes the whole atmosphere of the album really sort of spooky and quite scary in a weird sort of way. And it's almost like, Rain in Blood is basically just like being hit with a hammer, right? Whereas Hell Awaits is almost like being stuck in a horror movie, right? Because it's so kind of oppressive. And it's like there's all this weird shit going on. You've got this guy yelling about shagging a dead body and like what it's so, I find it's spooky. I find it a spooky album. And I don't think they ever did that as well again.
It's like being tortured over a period of months, isn't it? It's got that sort of feel.
It's just again and again. I think the sort of the deeper cuts on the album as well. Like Crypts of Eternity, Hardening of the Arteries. Even At Dawn They Sleep is probably a bit of a deep cut.
Yeah,
but
probably is.
It's just the whole album is just. I think it's just fucking unbelievable. And again, for kids who are what were they 20 when they did that, 21 or something. It's just like so. I think it's amazing. Obviously, I think Rain in Blood is amazing as well. But
you keep sort of fucking worming that in, so you don't get slated for.
It's because this was the hardest. It's because this was the hardest one. This was the hardest decision because I knew I had to have Slayer in there, but I'm just like, how can I not put Rain in Blood in? And I'm like, I feel more of an affinity.
I get it. I mean, what you said about Rain in Blood is bang on. It's perfect for what it is, but what it is it's Route One.
It is.
So
you're right. It's just Route One as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Isn't it? But do you think that Show No Mercy as well and Hell Awaits, the albums that get forgotten about because of Raining Blood?
Right, exactly.
And that's the shame because I think we've talked about it before with Show No Mercy that we love the production on Show No Mercy. It's that perfect level of rawness. It's filth. It's evil. It's nasty. And like I say, Hell Awaits is like I said, being tortured over a period of months, and then Raining Blood is the moment where they come in and finish you off with a hammer. Yeah. So it's and then South of Heaven is when they make sweet love to your dead corpse. It's all of that. Look, my favorite Slayer album is South of Heaven. And you think about it, it's daft because they got slated for South of Heaven because it was slow and they were called Slower. But you're right, Hell Awaits isn't all balls out speed. So it's not like Slayer hadn't done it before. So I think it's a great fucking choice.
Yeah, it just means the most to me. And it takes me back to being a teenager and sitting in my mate's bedroom just having my mind blown again and again. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just listening to this music that I had no idea really what it was, But
the first time I'd heard Hell Awaits, the title track is on Decade of Aggression, and that is just pure evil.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So how can you not have an appreciation for that? Right, I tell you what, let's have your luxury item. I'm massively intrigued to know what this will be.
No, the thing is, it's kind of boring because.
And don't say slippers or a fucking duvet or
Care Bear pajamas. No, it's not. No, so because I'm a vinyl nerd, my luxury item would have to be a turntable and speakers. So it would have to be an amazing stereo, just because otherwise you can't listen to anything. You know. So
well,
for me,
you're not going to do it on the cheap, are you?
So for me, it would be a kick-ass turntable, speakers, amplifier, which is, I think, realistic. Although obviously there's logistics of, is there electricity on this island? I guess there is. So,
well, I'm sure there's a fucking way, so yeah, some offshore sustainable power or something. Look, you're on a desert island, you've got time on your hands. You need to try things out, don't you?
Exactly.
And if you can create sustainable power off the back of it, then why the fuck not? So, but yeah, that makes total sense. But you're right, it is a bit boring. I think you can do better than that.
If you play Slayer, then you're going to attract boats at some point because they'll hear you.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's the point, actually. If it's fucking loud enough, then, you might get rescued. But then again, you might be quite happy on the island with your 8 records. So, fuck off, leave me alone.
Yeah, sorry, that was more boring choice, but I couldn't think of anything more essential.
Well, right? it makes more sense than a construction team and the London Astoria. So, I'll give you that one. All right, record number 4. What's next?
So record number 4 is the last of the thrash ones. I had to include. So I think my favorite thrash band of all time is Coroner. I talk about.
Yeah, I've seen you've talked about Coroner a lot. It's a weird one, that one.
There's a few people on Coroner on Twitter who are like, it's like, if you know, then you know, right? And
yeah,
Coroner,
yeah.
For me, if you haven't checked out Coroner, then I don't know if you have or not, but if you haven't, then just fucking go.
Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen them live. Yeah, I do.
So interestingly, I've never seen Coroner live. I've had tickets. I've had tickets to see them on 3 separate occasions. On every occasion, for some reason or other, I wasn't able to go. Not through my fault. It was either COVID, or then they were playing at a festival, and then the festival got cancelled. That was in Dublin. Anyway, so for me, I could have picked any one of their albums, but for me, the first one, R.I.P., is just again, mind-blowing technicality. It's like basically shredding, but managing to remain brutal. It's progressive without being wanky. I don't really like progressive music's generally too complicated for my brain. I just want to, give me a riff, but Coroner for me managed to basically keep everything brutal vocals, but with incredible melodic passages, amazing riffs, just fucking mind-blowing. And for me, I could have, on a different day, I could have gone for their second album, which is called Punishment for Decadence. But in the end, I went for their first one, R.I.P. Again, obviously, first one I heard came out in 87. I think I heard a song on the Friday Rock Show, which was the only way to hear metal on the radio back in the 80s. And I was just fucking blown away. It's just full of incredible guitaring, incredible songs. Reborn Through Hate is, I would say, probably their signature. That's kind of their equivalent of Angel of Death, I suppose. Or, it's just fucking amazing. But there's just every song on that album, is just I just sit there and think, I'm never ever going to be able to play this in a million years, so there's no point in trying. And sure enough, I'm correct. I can't play any of it.
Yeah, I've seen them. They were Bloodstock in 2000. I just googled it. I think it was 2011. I wasn't all that familiar with them, but I do remember. I remember being taken aback by how powerful they were, and they had that kind of presence that you get from certain bands. And I went away and listened to them a little bit more, and I quite like what I heard, but I haven't really listened to them much since. Off the back of this, I will, do the decent thing, and I'll go and give them another go. But yeah, it is one out of left field. It's a weird one. I don't hear many people talking about Coroner.
No, they're just they're kind of weirdly underground, but also really heralded as being one of the great kind of not lost thrash bands, but like a real cult thrash band, a bit like Violence, a bit like Violence, right?
Yeah.
Similar, right? But just the amazing thing is, they're a three-piece, first of all.
Yep.
It's just phenomenal. The fact that the bass player so the bass player is the vocalist, but the bass player often follows the riffs, which are really, really complicated. And the bass player follows the riffs with a bass line. So this is not metal where the bass is just kind of essentially playing the root note. The bass plays the riff as well, and the guy's singing at the same time. And it's just like, how the fuck do you even do that? It's a bit like watching Dave Mustaine, right? And you're like, how the hell are you playing that riff and singing? But this guy's doing it on bass, which is arguably a bit harder because the strings are harder to manage and so on. It's just, yeah, I just think they're a fucking brilliant band. For me, I could have picked any of their albums, but I think as I was doing this list, I'm like, it's got to be the first one. So that if you're going to dive into Coroner, I'd probably go chronologically, because they generally get more progressive and less thrashy as they go on. So if you start towards the end, you might think, what is this? This is a bit too proggy for me. I know you're like me, that you're not a massive fan of really progressive metal.
Fuck no.
So I'd start with the first one, R.I.P., and go from there.
Right, added to library. I shall do the usual. Yeah, but yeah, looking forward to that. Like I said, from what I remember of them, I thought they were really good, but they haven't really stuck with me. So but then my tastes have shifted a fair bit in the last sort of decade. So yeah, I'll give them a go. Are you familiar with them, Anne?
No, I'm happy now. But then again, it's like I say, the journey. There's still quite a few fresh bands that I want to. Next year, I want to properly rinse the 80s and early 90s of the underground stuff. So there are a few fresh bands, and that's one of them. So I will get to them.
I'll do the same. Sorry, I was literally just adding them to my iTunes library as we speak, so I don't forget. So what was that? That's number 4. So we're halfway. What's next on the list?
So next, going backwards into the 70s, and Sabbath, Master of Reality. Again, could have picked a number of Sabbath albums, but in the end, Master of Reality for me is the one that has the strongest songs, the best atmosphere. It's essentially a template for pretty much every stoner and doom album that followed it. So it's really important. For me, it contains one of my 2 favorite Sabbath songs, which is a bit of a deep cut, Lord of This World.
Great tune. Fucking great tune.
Oh, and the thing is, it was one of those ones, weirdly, that I wasn't particularly familiar with. I mean, I did like it, but I didn't appreciate how good it was until before Chupacabra formed, I was playing in a band, and we were doing our own stuff, but we also did a few covers, and one of them was Lord of This World, which our singer who had previously been Ozzy Osbourne in a big Sabbath tribute band. So he kind of brought it. It was like, when we used to play this song live, everyone used to go crazy, even though it's not one of the really big, it's not War Pigs or Paramore or something. Well, okay. So, and then it's one of those songs I had a really new appreciation for once we'd started playing it. And it's just like, God, this song's it was so much fun to play. And then it's just become my favorite Sabbath song, along with A National Acrobat off Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. But yeah, I just think, Children of the Grave, Into the Void, it's just got fucking the best Sabbath riffs all over the place. And as I said, it's just, you can basically trace a direct line back from every stoner and doom album that came after it, right back to somewhere on Master of Reality. And I think it's fucking brilliant. So
yeah, I'm with you. It's my favorite Sabbath album. It's got Children of the fucking Grave on it. I mean, when you're thinking Tony Iommi and riff, that's always the one that's the go-to for me, is Children of the Grave. It's everything that Sabbath did right is all in that song, and particularly that riff. And I mean, yeah, you could argue that the album is a little bit, the couple of interludes in there might be a bit short for what it is, not enough songs, but you got to think about, the first 6 Sabbath records were 3 and a bit years, 4 years,
right?
Tops, so they churned out a lot of material in a short space of time. But yeah, Master Reality is just. Yeah, it's almost perfection. It really is. You could have picked any of the first 6, I think, if you're going to go with Sabbath.
Yeah, I think, it was a tough call for me between that one and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. That's my other kind of favorite one, I think. But you're right. I mean, any of those first six are just fucking unbelievable. And again, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, I really hadn't heard much Sabbath in the 80s. I just didn't hear much. I probably heard Paranoid on the radio and probably heard some stuff. It was really only in the 90s when I went backwards and was digging into what the 80s bands that I loved, who had influenced them. And that's when I discovered Sabbath, Zeppelin, Aerosmith, all those bands. So I came to Sabbath late, I guess, in the 90s, but fuck, what a band,
But you can come to Sabbath whenever you want.
Yeah, I mean, Sabbath, I think a lot of 70s stuff probably fell by the wayside in the 80s because there was so much going on.
Yeah.
And everything getting faster and heavier, and the look and feel was very different. And I think, Ozzy's focus was on his solo stuff, and Sabbath, the leftover Sabbath, they weren't producing great material by the mid 80s, were they, at least? So
I did quite like Headless Cross, though, actually. I did quite like that record. But
I like Headless Cross. I think it's a great album.
Yeah, like Devil and Daughter's a great song, and the title track's a great song. But you're right. I mean, but that Sabbath doesn't sound anything like Ozzy Sabbath.
No. And that's the weird thing about Sabbath. I think all the different incarnations there were, they all kind of sound a bit different. We won't really talk too much about Born Again. No. But Dehumanizer I really like as well. Another one that gets a little bit of a dig. And Bean is one of the biggest advocates of the underrated Sabbath material. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. Even the Tony Martin stuff, like I said, Headless Cross. Look, you've got Tony Iommi, so you're gonna get something, aren't you? You're gonna get something good from it.
Exactly.
Even his solo album that was, fuck me, tail end of the 90s, early 2000s, was it? Had loads of different vocalists on it. Even that, I think he's got some good stuff on it.
Seventh Star, is it called? Is that what you
I can't fucking remember. I can't remember what it was called.
No, Seventh Star was what he did in '86, I think. So
yeah, this was a solo album in either the very late 90s or very early 2000s.
Oh, okay.
With loads of different vocalists, and I think it's just called Iommi. I think.
Yeah, I think that was early noughties.
Yeah, very early noughties. We were students, I think, roughly when that came out. I think you've got. You know what? Let me have a look. I'm pretty sure you've got like Skin from Skunk Anansie and various other people. Let me have a look. You talk amongst yourselves while I look it up. I'm just trying to look up the. So yeah, you had Skin from Skunk Anansie, Phil Anselmo, Dave Grohl, Pete Steele, Ozzy Osbourne, Ian Astbury. That's the one I remember. Flame On.
Yeah.
Surge from System of a Down. You got Henry Rollins, Billy Corgan, Billy Idol,
Peter Steele.
There are some great names on there. So yeah, if you're not familiar with it, I'll check it out because there is some good stuff on it.
Okay, and it's just called Iommi, is it?
It's just called Iommi. Yeah. So that was good content. One we'll be sitting here googling shit. Let's go on to the next one then before we try anything different. Where are we? Number 6.
Number 6. So this is like a bit of a unusual or surprising pick because I wanted to make sure that not everything I picked was released 40 plus years ago or 35 plus years ago. If there's one album that means more to me over the past couple of years than anything else, it's an album that came out last year, Inexorum, and the album's called Equinox Vigil.
I've seen you post this a couple of times on Twitter. I think I've had a brief listen to it, but not much.
And I don't want to get too heavy and everything here, but a couple of years ago, I went through this horrendous personal thing, which kind of upended my life. And that's kind of about the same time. And I'd been on metal Twitter for a while. I'd been on Twitter for a while, but I hadn't kind of fully sort of started interacting with people until really the beginning of 2022. And that's when I discovered that there was this amazing community of people that were sharing music and like recommending new stuff. And obviously there was like K-Man who was doing his Friday drops. And I was like, God, and this is like where I realized up until that point, I think in terms of new music, all I was really interested in doing was trying to find new thrash, right? That was it, because I was a thrash guy, basically. Everything else, I was perfectly happy just to be stuck listening to my old Maiden albums and old Sabbath albums and Candlemass and stuff. But the more I got into metal Twitter, X, whatever it's called,
fuck that.
the more I realized that there was so much amazing new metal coming out all the time. There was an amazing community of people, and also my mind, or my ears, I should say, were being kind of broadened beyond just what I was listening to, right? So I started being more open to listening to more death metal and more black metal, and not much. So that's point one. Then point two, I've never really been a black metal fan. I don't like the stuff. I don't like the kind of the true, early Norwegian. I just think it sounds shit. And that's like,
because most of it is shit.
It's like, I can understand that it was important, and I can understand that, I can understand in a bit of a similar way to how punk was reacting against the Zeppelin type stuff. I can understand, I can see its place. Yeah. So I don't want to say it's pointless. It's just, for me, it doesn't do anything at all. All those things combined. Inexorum came out, I think, in June of last year, so June 2022. It's essentially a black metal album, but it's just a lot more than that. And I listened to it, and I was just like, this is the most fucking unbelievable thing I've ever heard. And it made me realize, that's the thing, it made me realize that opening your ears and opening your mind to a whole broader range of metal, okay, you might still not love, I still don't love loads of black metal. I still don't love loads of death metal. But when something hits properly, it doesn't matter what genre of metal it is. And so the Inexorum album is incredibly important to me, because it sort of symbolizes this opening of, it symbolizes the opening of my mind to all these different types of metal, and symbolizes this sort of discovering this amazing metal community on Twitter, which obviously you guys are an integral part of. So many other podcasts are, so many people just sharing stuff all the time. K-Man doing what he does, it's just, and it's an amazing thing, But anyway, the album itself, it's just mind-blowingly technical, but it still manages to be really melodic and really heavy. It's progressive without ever being wanky and pretentious. It is a black metal album in the sense of it's got blast beats and it's got black metal type vocals, but it's just got so much musicality to it, dynamics, light and shade. It's epic. The production's amazing, which obviously is not, it makes it sound nothing like Norwegian black metal. I just think it's a fucking masterpiece. And honestly, I haven't kept a tally, but I would be amazed if there's been any other album that I've listened to more since June of 2022 than that, including all Metallica and Slayer and everything else. I've just listened to it so much. And I think the other thing it's really interesting about it is it's the only album where I don't really know the names of the songs. I can't, and the reason is because it's probably the only album that I listen to regularly where I literally just put it on, close my eyes, and just listen to the whole thing from start to finish. Okay, I've got to flip the vinyl, but you know what I mean? It's like, for me, it just works as a whole piece of work, right? So for me, I don't even think about it in terms of, oh yeah, track 2's good, and oh yeah, the first song on side 2 is good, and the last song's really good. For me, I think about it as this one body of work, which I guess is what an album should be in its purest form,
And that's a rarity these days, isn't it? A complete album that you actually listen to start to finish. That's what makes the difference. What was the album title?
Equinox Vigil. Yeah.
How I didn't remember that.
I don't recall us coming across that one last year. I know we were still sort of new to the podcast thing, and we were, we hadn't really probably dug into metal Twitter that much. But
it's in my library, based purely because I've seen you post about it several times on Twitter, especially. And yeah, you know what? I'll just back that up quickly as well. Twitter gets a lot of stick these days, and outside of certain communities, Twitter, I'm not going to call it X. Twitter can be a platform for the vile, to be quite honest with you. But that community that's on there, the heavy metal community, and like you said, sharing new music and discovering new music and recommending deep cuts and all that kind of thing, I've never known a source of music quite like it. It's incredible. And like you said, every Friday morning, I get up really early on every day of the week for work, about 4:30 a.m. And one of the first things I do on a Friday is I go on Twitter and I start looking at K-Man's list.
Yeah.
And the mad fucker's still posting at that time in the morning because there's usually so many albums. And there's so much great stuff I would never have heard this year if it wasn't for that and wasn't particularly for K-Man. So yeah, just to echo that sentiment, 100%.
Sorry,
that album cover's beautiful.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It is.
That's lovely. That is a lovely album cover.
Really is, and it's just what a fucking album. And yeah, I think in fact it was, to be fair, if you don't mind me giving a nod to one of your rivals, but I think it was Jimmy on the Bangers and Mosh podcast.
We don't have rivals. Nige, come on.
No, I know everyone's friends, but I think it was him. I think that it was in their monthly roundup, and he was like, I think he described it as, if you think that this is black metal and you don't like black metal, therefore you shouldn't listen to it, think again, because yes, this is black metal, but it's nothing like you think black metal sounds like. And I was like, okay, that's interesting.
That's a great analogy, that, because with black metal, there's a lot of the stuff around these days, modern takes on black metal, and even modern takes on old school punky black metal. It makes you realize, and I know the true black metal fans would slate me for this, and don't get me wrong, some of it I do like, but most of it, 95% of it, is dog shit. But these days, there are bands out there that are doing that kind of thing a million times better than what was happening in the early 90s. So yeah, I do get it 100%. I'll have to give it I have listened to it, but nothing has stuck in because I don't think I've given it enough time, but I will now. I'll go back and give it the proper
on Spotify, looking at my profile, 763 monthly listeners. So
true cult black metal these days. That's the equivalent in the 90s of just having a demo tape, isn't it? So
I think the reason I sort of clicked with the name is because I know their members have formed Majesties.
Yes, exactly.
That's
it. That, of course it is. Yeah. Right. Fair enough. Yeah. Now
it's Matthew Kirkwald and Carl. What's his name? Skildum. Is that his name?
You don't know. You tell me.
It's one of the guys from Majesties, anyway.
Yeah. Which was another great album from this year. I mean, I think I may have overhyped it in my own mind a little bit when I first heard a couple of songs. Wasn't as good as I'd hoped to be, but it was still a great album. So, clearly quality songwriters. Fair play.
But yeah, so brilliant album, and brilliant album in itself, but also brilliant album for what it means to me in terms of sort of discovering and embracing and being embraced by the metal Twitter community, which I think I agree, is just, I've never known anything like it. Yeah,
completely agree. Right, so you've got 2 records left. One of those, either one of those two, going to go on.
I thought he's got 3 records left.
What are we up to?
2.
2 left. Yeah, 2 left. Yeah, I'm right. Fuck off. Are either of those two going to create any shocks or surprises?
No, I don't think so. No.
You've let me down. All right, okay. So let's go straight in with number 7 then before we do anything else. What's next?
Okay, number 7 is back to the 80s and back to a traditional metal. Judas Priest, Defenders of the Faith. The weird thing about Judas Priest is I was not into them at all back in the day. I think it's because by the time I got into metal in the mid-80s, I think Judas Priest were kind of on a bit of a down. I know now Turbo is probably has a better reputation now than it did then. But I think back then Judas Priest were on a bit of a downward trajectory, right, with Turbo and Ram It Down, and then they came back with Painkiller. Whereas I guess by comparison, Iron Maiden were kind of really on an upward trajectory because they did Power Slave and then did Somewhere in Time, which made them, and then Southern Sun. So for me, Judas Priest back in the 80s didn't really register that much. I thought I didn't really like them. But coming to them later, I was just like, fuck them, man, they're amazing. But particularly Defenders of the Faith, I think is particularly side one. I mean, the whole albums are great, right? But I think particularly side one is the most perfect 20 minutes, however long it is, of traditional heavy metal that it's possible to get. I don't think it gets any better. Free Will Burning, Jawbreaker, Rock Hard Ride Free, Sentinel. But it's fucking hell, man. Just one song after another of just like, this is like perfect heavy metal. Perfect.
The Sentinel's a massively underrated Judas Priest song.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I think it's their best song. I think it's their best song. It's just absolutely. I think I had a big conversation about that with somebody on Twitter, and I was like, the Sentinel is the best fucking Judas Priest song ever, or possibly the best heavy metal song ever.
Fucking hell! That's a different conversation altogether.
But I just think, for me, it's like, I don't know. Like for me, it's like if there's that question of like, if somebody who'd never heard metal before or had never heard music before and said, what is heavy metal? I think I would play them Defenders of the Faith and say, this is heavy metal.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, you say about, the sort of 80s Priest and that sort of downward trajectory. I am a sucker for slightly naff, cheesy 80s Judas Priest, which I get grief from this man over here.
I'm cool. I can see the attraction of Ram It Down, and I love Turbo. So.
Yeah, Ram It Down is probably my favorite Priest album, which which I do get some stick for.
No, it's a very 80s production, and I'm down with that.
Yeah, I think it was more just at the, again, I think it's more at the time. Like now, I really like it, but I think again, it was at the time. Judas Priest just weren't really resonating with the teenage.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Whereas Iron Maiden, and I always kind of consider them as being almost like the same kind of band, right?
Yeah.
For me, Iron Maiden were everywhere all the time, whereas Judas Priest just weren't really.
Yeah,
in the UK, because obviously the UK is it's a bit more po-faced. It's always more concerned with the contemporary stuff and what's cool. And as much as we can say, Iron Maiden were brilliant. It's like, British press didn't really want to give a shit about anyone else apart from Maiden in terms of modern British metal. And I think by that point, Judas Priest were, I don't want to say past it because that's bollocks, but I think the press didn't. They were like, nah, Priest are old school. They peaked with British Steel. Anything after that, we're not interested in because there's other metal. Whereas in America, that's where they kept up their career. If it wasn't for America, Judas Priest could have fallen by the wayside in the 80s completely. Yeah. But I think that's it. They have the late 70s in Britain to an extent, and the 80s but they just effectively relocated to America because Britain was like, no, we've got Maiden and Motorhead to an extent, and that's fine. And also, again, when you've got thrash, and Judas Priest making stuff like Turbo by 86, I can see that.
Yeah. It was just it's weird, Whereas now, I think, obviously, I still love Maiden, but I think now I listen to Priest more. I think I listen to Defenders of the Faith more than any Maiden album now. I
listen to Priest more these days than I ever have done. Weirdly, it is an odd one, but like you mentioned Painkiller as well. What a fucking comeback! When you say they're on a downward trajectory, to come back with that, just fucking incredible. Well worth
incredible. But I think it's, for me, I wouldn't. Oh, this is hard. I'm going into another crucified moment. But I think Painkiller's really, 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 really good. But I think it's slightly overhyped by people.
I can see that to a certain extent. It is a fucking great album, but I see what you mean.
For me, it's
no way my favorite Priest album.
For me, it's number 3. I think Defenders of the Faith is number 1. Scream of Vengeance is number 2. Painkiller is number 3 for me.
Wow, that's an interesting conversation we're going to have at some point in the future. So, we'll do Priest albums at some point in the coming months. So, right. So before we do your last album, then let's talk metal shirts, because of a man of your age, for us in the 90s and early 2000s, so like, the 80s metal shirts were the things that you sort of craved and you sought after in the early days of eBay and whatnot. It's that some of these were like the holy grail. So
what's that one shirt that you wouldn't be able to live without? You're going to bear in mind you're going to sleep in it. You're going to, everything in that t-shirt.
So the thing is, I wasn't sure whether to. I've got two, right? So if it's one that I have owned at some point in my life but now don't, it would be the Master of Puppets tour shirt from '86. But there were a few shirts. I mean, I didn't go to as many gigs back then as I do now because obviously I didn't have the money and I was a kid, right?
Yep.
But I did see Metallica on the Puppets tour. I saw Slayer on the Reign in Pain tour. I saw Iron Maiden on the Seventh Son tour, and I had shirts for all of those, right? I saw Motley Crue on the Dr. Feelgood tour. I didn't have a shirt for that, weirdly, but anyway. But I threw them all away because A, I'm a fucking idiot. B, I'm a fucking idiot. B, they fell apart because I wore them too much, and that was certainly the case with the Metallica one and the Slayer one. Or C, I just grew out of them because when I was a kid, I was about the same height as I am now, but I was about half the weight. So
yeah, weren't we all, mate?
Yeah. So now, if I still had them, it would just look silly. I wish I had kept them. Of course, I wish I had kept them. Just like I had I had some. I mean, they were played with, not boxed, but I had some original like Star Wars toys, which apparently now are worth a load of money.
Yep.
But they were toys, and I haven't still gone. It's like, do I wish I'd kept them? Yeah, but I was fucking 7 years old. I didn't know they were going to be
exactly. Yeah, different times.
So the answer is, if it was one that I've owned at one point in my life but now don't, then it would probably be the Puppets. Yeah, the damaging ink shirt from that tour. But if it's one that I own now, it's another one that I got last year, which is a Merciful Fate long sleeve. So Merciful Fate headlined the Mystic Festival in Poland last year, and as part of that tour they did. And they hadn't played together for a really long time and blah, blah, blah. And it was one of those bands, a bit like you were saying about the Almighty at the beginning of the conversation, right? About a band that you never saw back in the day and you never thought that you would ever get to see. And for me, I was just like, Merciful Fate, man. I never, ever thought I would get to see Merciful Fate. And I was just like, and they were amazing. And I was like, I've got to get a shirt. And the shirts were fucking sick. So I got a Merciful Fate Jackal of Salzburg shirt, which is their supposedly new album coming out next. And it was just, and the reason it's important to me is just because it's a sick shirt, but B, it was a fucking amazing gig. Never thought I'd get to see them, And also there was a weird and quite funny, not funny story. I was staying in a hotel, and the following morning after Merciful Fate had played, which I think was the Sunday morning, I went down to breakfast, got my eggs and stuff or whatever from the buffet, sat at the table, and on the next table to me was Hank Sherman, who's the Merciful Fate guitar player, having breakfast. And I was just like, and I haven't met tons of famous people, but I generally am okay around famous people because I just think, well, they're kind of just normal guys. As they always are, right? They're always just cool. But I was just completely fucking starstruck and I just couldn't. And so I basically spent about half an hour sitting next to Hank Sherman having breakfast, didn't say a word, and then eventually he left. And I was like, you're Nige, you're a fucking idiot. Why didn't you just why didn't you just say, I think your band are fucking brilliant? He would have liked that, right? But I didn't.
That's all you would have needed to have said. Do you know what I mean? That's as far as just, I think you're fucking brilliant. That's it. You can't make a tit of yourself saying shit like that.
What an idiot. But anyway, when I was checking out of the hotel, Joey Vera who's now the bass player, was checking out in front of me. So I did say to him, you guys were fucking brilliant. And by the way, I love Armored Saint. And he was like, thanks, man. Really nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. So that was cool. But still, no offense to Joey Vera, but Hank Sherman.
Yeah,
why didn't I say something? Why didn't I say something? What an idiot. Anyway, yeah, so that's it. I love that shirt. I love that. That gig was amazing. I love Merciful Fate. and I'm a fucking idiot as well. So that's why.
I got to back up the Merciful Fate things. Obviously, they headlined Bloodstock last year as well, and they were so fucking good. I don't know what I was expecting from King Diamond last year. I wasn't expecting to maybe not quite nail the proper moments and whatnot, but fuck me, absolutely nailed it.
I know
they were the band of the weekend by a country mile last year.
Yeah, and they were the band of the Mystic Festival, which had a great lineup, but they were the band of the weekend for me as well. They were or actually them and Celtic Frost who played as well, or Touch. Brilliant.
Yeah, fucking. I think they played one new song, didn't they? Like, it was unfinished, wasn't it? I think was what he was kind of talking about. So, but it gave us an idea of what to expect from a new album. So I'm looking forward to it. It'd be good to have them back, and with a bit of luck, touring again, and some indoor shows would be nice as well, rather than just festivals.
I hope so.
So right, okay, then. So we've reached that point. Final album. What we got? I think you've just alluded to it. I think.
Have I?
Did you say it? Did you mention it? I don't know. Go on.
So it's the only album on the list which isn't really a metal album, although it is obviously rock.
Right.
I went backwards and forwards between two bands, and eventually I settled on Led Zeppelin. The other band I went backwards and forwards with was The Doors, and then with Led Zeppelin, I put them into a similar category to Maiden, is in that for me, their best songs are spread across literally all of their albums. And so for me, I had to go, this is when I kind of cheated a bit and went for Mothership, which is a compilation, a best of compilation, essentially selected by the three remaining members. I think maybe mid 2000s, maybe 2000.
Yeah, something like that.
Maybe it was to coincide with the gig at the O2. It was around then, wasn't it?
Yeah, that makes sense. I do remember. Yeah, I remember it being released. Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing else really that I can say about Led Zeppelin that hasn't been said a billion times before. But for me, they're just like, Mothership has got absolutely fucking everything. It's got the best of their blues, Since I've Been Loving You. It's got the best of their riffing songs, Black Dog. It's obviously got Stairway to Heaven, which I know is overplayed and it's a bit of a cliche, but
it's still a great fucking song.
When you hear it, you're like, yeah, exactly. It's like this. This is it's got Kashmir. It's got everything that made Led Zeppelin brilliant. The only thing it doesn't have is my two favorite deep cuts of theirs, both of which are on Physical Graffiti, 10 Years Gone and The Rover. It doesn't have those two, but I figure that if I've got everything else, then I can deal with that. Oh, No Quarter it's got, which is another possibly my favorite Zeppelin song. It's just, yeah, I mean, Zeppelin is a band I never got to see. Again, I was, for that I was too young, obviously. Obviously tried to get tickets to the O2 gig and failed. Wasn't going to pay 50 grand or whatever it was that people were paying to go and see them. But yeah, what a fucking band. And I can't add anything to anything that's already been said. The only thing I would say is that about 10 years ago, you remember when Robert Plant did that album with Alison Krauss?
Yep.
So
folky, bluesy, kind of, yeah.
So I went to see them when they played at the O2. I think it must have been the O2, or was it Wembley? No, I think it was the O2. I went to that show. And, Robert Plant was pretty, it was great. It was a great evening. And Robert Plant was, he doesn't sing so kind of Zeppelin-y anymore, right? It's
no.
But there were a couple of moments where he went into, they did a few Led Zeppelin covers, right? And there was a couple of moments, there was one moment in particular where he went into one of his kind of sort of screams, the high-pitched Zeppelin-y screams. Oh, this is why they were amazing, because it just filled the whole place. And it was just like, oh, okay, that's what it was all about. That's what seeing Zeppelin live on a good night would have been all about back in 1975 or whatever. It was just absolutely unbelievable. And it only lasted for, 10 seconds. But it was just, fucking hell, it was incredible.
I think I'm with you on the Led Zeppelin compilation thing, because in the 90s when I sort of had started to listen to Led Zeppelin, it was the Remasters compilation.
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
crop circles on the cover. Yeah, that was a really good introduction to their sort of whole back catalogue, even to some of the sort of later 70s stuff, which often gets a little bit slated. But if it's going to nail, if we said to you for this, you have to pick one Led Zeppelin studio album, though, which would you go for? I mean, I'm intrigued because I've got my outright favorite, but I'm just intrigued to know what it would be.
I think if fucking hell. I think it would be. I think it will be Physical Graffiti.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense
because it's got fucking hell. That
it's a tough call. It's a really fucking tough call.
I mean, I think it would be Physical Graffiti because it's got Kashmir, which is a masterpiece. It's got two of my favorite Led Zeppelin deep cuts, 10 Years Gone and The Rover. It's got an amazing blues, which is Custard Pie.
Love Custard Pie.
Yeah, it's got fucking. Yeah, it's so difficult though, because that means you get no When the Levee Breaks, you get no Black Dog, you get no Porter. Fucking hell, man. No, I think it would be Physical Graffiti. Hey, it's long as well. So on the desert island, you've got more.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. It's Led Zeppelin 3 for me. That's always been my.
That's brilliant as well.
Always been my favorite, which is, it's their lightest album, I suppose you can put it that way. But Tangerine, Gallows Pole, they're two of my favorite Zeppelin songs, and the rest of the album it's just an absolute fucking classic. Always been torn between that and Led Zeppelin 1, but again, similar to Sabbath, any of their first kind of 5-6 albums,
yeah,
you can't go wrong. You can't. Just so many great songs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like a massive Zeppelin fan like you guys are, and it's probably a bit of a cliche, but I'd stick with 4 just because it's the distillation of everything I think they were good at.
Yeah, I mean, again, you can't pick holes in any of those albums. You got justifiable reasons to choose any of them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look at 4. It's got When the Levee Breaks, which is phenomenal. It's got arguably the best ballady rock song ever written.
Yeah,
it's got Black Dog, which is one of the most brilliant riffs, completely out of time in a weird fucking time signature. And I love that. And I don't know if it's apocryphal or if it's true, but it's in that weird time signature. And apparently John Bonham was like, "Fuck that!" And so he just plays straight through it. So the one, the beat just changes, and eventually it kind of comes back in a really chaotic way, and eventually ends up being back in time. Just fucking, whether that's an accident or whether it's not, just fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, but some of the best things come out of accidents. So
you got stuff like the Battle of Evermore, which for me does Volume 3 stuff better.
Yeah, I kind of see where you come from. Look, I'm also a huge fan of Going to California, but it's I don't know what resonates with me though with Led Zeppelin 3, and this is going to sound weird, is the movie Almost Famous.
Oh, what a movie! Incredible. That's the way.
Exactly. The way that movie intertwines with 70s hard rock, it makes you realize just how fucking great it must have been. Because you're in the formative years of hard rock and heavy metal, whatever it became, Zeppelin, Sabbath, like you say, The Doors, obviously not metal, but people like Bowie and Deep Purple and all those artists. What a fucking great time that must have been.
Amazing. And actually last night I was watching a documentary on Duane Allman, which was on Amazon Prime, I think. And I'm not a massive Allman Brothers fan particularly. But this documentary is like an hour and a half. And you listen to obviously bits of the music and you see some of the footage and it's just like, fucking hell, man. What a time. What a time. And like we said before, I feel lucky that I was born at the time I was. So I kind of hit the thrash explosion or the metal explosion at just the right age. But imagine being born 15 years before then.
Yeah.
So bands that were hitting was Hendrix, The Doors, Zeppelin, Sabbath.
Yeah, it must have been wild because music changed completely.
Yeah,
in the very late 60s and into the early 70s, completely changed, and to be a part of that must have been incredible.
Yeah, if you're born in 55, so you're still You're still a young kid when the Beatles hit. You're probably not into music, but you turned 15 in 69, 70.
Yeah.
Hell.
Yeah, you're onto something pretty fucking special. Yeah, completely. All right, that was a fucking proper nerd out. That was.
It certainly was. It certainly was.
Which we're always a big fan of. So nice. Cheers for that. And there was a much more level-headed and structured version of what we wanted to achieve in the first place. So,
well, it's a great format. So I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on, and I hope you do lots more of them because they're always it's always good.
100%. And you're always welcome to come on again. Right, so we are almost at the end of the year. Our next episode now will be the last one of the year, which will be our roundup of 2023. We will reveal our sort of collective top albums of the year. We're doing a top 11 because for obvious reasons. And after that, we'll do our own sort of personal top 20s. But this will be a collective selection of our favorite albums for the year, with an overly complicated formula in place to create some kind of fair list. But I think you'll both agree that, I mentioned this last week, 2023 has been a fucking unbelievable year in present music. So trying to nail it down to a top 10, 20, 30, 40 even has been a tough job.
I'm actually, I've actually been losing sleep over how the fuck. It's like, how the fuck am I going to how am I going to reduce this down? And how am I going to put it in order? And how the fuck am I compare an amazing progressive death metal album with an absolutely ripping black and thrash album? How can you say which one's better than the other one?
Yeah, exactly.
It is, but it's weird because I've not listened to more metal this year than I have ever. I've listened to more metal this year than I've ever done any other year previously. It's a bit of a rebirth. And I've got a top 40. Well, I'm trying to sort it out, but that's never happened to me before. And the only way I've been able to do that is to actually track things as I go along and actually decide what I like. Usually, what albums you prefer. It's a desert island question. Which would you prefer if you had to, kind of thing? That's how you have to look at it. And I'd have a top 20 halfway through the year, so that helps. It's the only way. Otherwise, you get to November and you just...
It's a fucking... Keeping record of it now is a part-time job. I think I might take on an assistant in 2024 just to make life a bit easier. So if anybody fancies the job, it pays no fucking money, but it'll make my life easier. So again, thanks, Nige, for coming on. We'll be back in a week or so with the end-of-year episode. And that's about that. Thanks for listening and stay metal.